Hi guys, this is Tabiasobian Today will be elementary, dear Watson, as I do a quick comparison of 8 elemental skills and elemental skill combinations in Monster Hunter World Iceborne. Yeah, so Iceborne really doubled down on elemental builds by providing a variety of options. Kind of like a buffet, or a poo-poo platter. Anyway, I decided to do a quick test, just out of curiosity a while back, while I was putting a bunch of sets together. I thought it might be of interest to you guys as well, so I decided to share it in this video, at least share my results. Basically, I decided to test 8 elemental skills, or elemental skill combinations, to see how they compared with each other. The combinations are Elemental Acceleration plus Critical Element, True Dragon Vein Awakening, True Elemental Acceleration, True Critical Element, Dragon Vein Awakening plus Elemental Acceleration, Dragon Vein Awakening plus Critical Element, True Critical Element plus Elemental Acceleration, and then last but not least, or maybe it is, True Elemental Acceleration plus Critical Element. Now first off, let me say right off the bat that this is an informal test. I try to equalize everything as much as I can, but there are certain quirks in this game that can be hard to completely standardize across the board for a test like this. For starters, I'm only using a hammer because I happen to have a Safi one with Silver Rathalos Essence, and another one with Namiel Divinity, which I needed for this test, and I didn't want to waste any more of my remaining Dracolite that I got for the first Safi event. I am hoarding that stuff like Ebenezer Scrooge. At least until the next Safi event, which I think is actually I think it's happening right now. Talk about good timing. Anyway, I will also include a cheat sheet in this video from a Japanese YouTuber, just to give you guys an idea about the elemental bonuses for each weapon. Basically, when you're comparing critical element versus true critical element. Another caveat is that the Safi hammers I used were not upgraded with additional elemental attack increase on the weapons themselves because, like I mentioned earlier, I didn't want to use my remaining Dracolite. As a result, these hammers start out with a lower base value of 180 elemental attack. The reason I mention this is because lower base elemental values tend to benefit skills with flat elemental bonuses, such as Dragon Vein Awakening and True Dragon Vein Awakening, for example, or even Elemental Acceleration and True Elemental Acceleration. Conversely, higher base elemental attack values benefit more from percentage-based bonuses, such as Critical Element or True Critical Element. So, using a super oversimplified example, when you add 150 elemental attack from True Dragon Vein Awakening, for example, to a weapon with 180 attack, that's equivalent to about, say, 83% as far as the increase in your attack power. So that would actually trump the bonus from True Critical Element, which is equivalent to about 1.40 to 1.70. So about a 40% to 70% damage increase depending on the weapon. Now say you actually use a weapon though that has a base element of 400 elemental attack. That means that the bonus you get from True Dragon Vein Element is now reduced to about 37% or 38%. Because it's a flat bonus, so it doesn't stack with your elemental attack. All of a sudden, the 50% or so bonus from Critical Element and then the 70% bonus from True Critical Element when you're, say, using a hammer is starting to look better. Also, due to the lower 180 elemental attack on these weapons, there were times when I ended up not being able to fully utilize the true potential of an elemental skill because I ended up hitting the elemental cap earlier. Elemental Acceleration and True Elemental Acceleration were especially susceptible to hitting that cap much faster. In contrast, Dragon Vein Awakening and True Dragon Vein Awakening didn't have the same elemental cap floor as Elemental Acceleration or True Elemental Acceleration, and I was actually able to push the sets with those skills higher from an elemental attack standpoint. Now my hope is that I'll actually be able to retest these weapons at some point after I actually upgrade them using Dracolite to include several elemental attack up upgrades. And like I said earlier, this test is limited to one weapon. That's important to note because Critical Element and True Critical Element provide different percentage bonuses depending on the weapon. Like for Hammer, which I mentioned earlier, I said it's about 50% for Critical Element and then 70% for True Critical Element, at least according to this test done by this Japanese YouTuber that I follow. And then for Dual Blades, it changes from 29% for Critical Element and then 57% for True Critical Element. Yeah, so speaking of those bonuses, if you're curious, here's a list of the Critical Element and True Critical Element bonuses for every weapon courtesy of Japanese YouTuber Minna de Ishoni Monhan Life, which roughly translates to a Monster Hunter life with everyone. Anyway, the guy tested every weapon on the trading pool way back in September, so I'm not sure if there has been any patches to the bonuses since then, but it still gives you a good idea of the additional boost you get from either critical element or true critical element. And it even throws in what the old bonuses were in the Monster Hunter World base game. Also, in case you're curious, the flat bonuses from Dragon Vein Awakening is plus 80 elemental attack, and then 150 elemental attack for True Dragon Vein Awakening, and then for elemental acceleration it's plus 60 elemental attack, and then it goes up to a 150 flat bonus for additional elemental attack when using True Elemental Acceleration. Anyway, for my own test, I did not add any skills to the armor sets besides the affinity boosts, so you don't get any attack buffs or anything in these tests. I just wanted to standardize everything as much as I can. Also, even though I'm using two different elemental hammers, like an ice one and a dragon one, the elemental values are exactly the same, so it should be fine. Anyway, here are the findings from the test. So right off the bat, you'll notice a few things. One is that when using weapons with lower base elemental attack, Dragon Vein Awakening plus critical element almost always inflicts the highest damage. Well, actually pretty much does. Just remember, however, that for weapons with high base elemental attack values, true critical element should eventually overtake the Dragon Vein Awakening plus critical element combo. The threshold for overtaking varies depending on the weapon type. Another observation is that sets that use true elemental acceleration and elemental acceleration do well at first, especially for weapons with lower base elemental attack values. But like I said earlier, they are more susceptible to hitting the elemental cap earlier once you start slotting in elemental jewels like Frost or Dragon Decos. Also, while elemental acceleration combined with true critical element does the most damage with a base Safi weapon without any elemental jewels equipped, elemental acceleration becomes a NAN factor the more elemental jewels are used. I'm assuming this is due to elemental acceleration being more susceptible to hitting that cap, especially for weapons with lower base elemental attack. Anyway, the moral of the story here is that Dragon Vein Awakening plus critical element is the way to go in terms of getting more damage at first. When using a weapon with higher base elemental attack, however, true critical element should outpace it in general. Obviously, the next step, like I said earlier, is to test this with, say, Safi weapons that have elemental upgrades and see what happens once a weapon's base elemental attack is raised pretty high before adding elemental jewels or skills. With Safi Jiva returning for another go-around, I'll hopefully be able to get more Dracolite in order to fuel the next experiment. As always, if you have any thoughts or questions, or if you notice any errors, please feel free to share them in the comments section. Once again, this is Tabi Asobi, and thank you for watching.